Shaun of the Dead is a 90-minute love letter to the zombie movie, a genre widely agreed to have been invented and defined by director George A. Romero. A man who, whilst an admitted fan of Shaun of the Dead, still watched it and missed direct references to his own movies.
Oh, Shaun of the Dead is a film that is full of references.
Yeah, and that's because Edgar Wright is a huge nerd who crams his movies full of more references and details than a teddy bear stuffed with mulch encyclopedias. And no doubt as I'm saying this, there'll be a fact bar below with a couple of ones I'm not about to mention in the comment section. Below that will also be filled with people screaming out things we missed or did not mention, despite the fact I clearly watched the director's commentary where you got those facts from too. And Nisha, is that one of the most uniquely frustrating things about making these videos?
Yeah, it's like we talk about a lot of references in films, TV shows, but there's always someone who says you missed this reference. It's like we can't reference everything. I mean, we can't talk about every reference. There's just so many.
Or people saying either I can't believe you didn't mention or did you not know that? It's like, yes, I did. It was probably mentioned in a raw cut of the video. It's just we cut it for time because everybody knows that. For example, there are numerous references to the many people who helped define the genre the movie is a tribute to. One of the more obscure, I guess, being Mary the zombie. And you know that one, Nisha? Do you remember who she is?
The girl in the garden.
There's a girl in the garden. What? In the garden, there is a girl.
And for all the people who are going to scream out in the comments, yes, we know that Mary appears earlier in the film. This is an Edgar Wright movie. He loves Chekhov's gun.
Yeah, she's the cashier at the start of the film, isn't she?
She is, yes. And that is where the reference comes in because she's a cashier, she's wearing a name badge. And that name badge is very difficult to read, but you can see it if you slow down the movie and zoom in, or just look at this handy screenshot we provided for you here. And not only does the name badge reveal the character's name, Mary, it also says that she works at Landis supermarket.
Okay, so what is Landis a reference to?
Well, I know that you know that, Nisha, but thank you for asking that question so we can let the audience know as well. And that is a reference to the director of An American Werewolf in London, John Landis. It's a play on the word Landis. So she works in a shop called Landis instead of Londis, and it's a pretty clever reference, all things considered. And then, keeping in the theme of name badges, the store that Shaun works at, do you remember what it's called, Nisha?
Foree something?
Yes, Foree Electronics. That is also a reference to Ken Foree, the actor who played one of the main characters in the original Dawn of the Dead. Specifically, the guy who, upon learning that the end of the world is afoot, immediately steals a giant swag jacket.
Oh,
Truly a fucking icon.
What the hell are they?
They're us, that's all. There's no more room in hell.
Swag jacket, that's great.
It's just great because he just steals it. It's like they're in a mall. It's like, well, there's no fucking law anymore. I'm taking a jacket.
You want to look good for the end of the world.
That's exactly the point, yeah. And people wonder what I'm doing there. I'm scrolling down on the original article that I have there. Only some of this stuff is stored up here. The rest of it's stored down there.
Okay, so getting back onto Shaun of the Dead.
Yes.
Those references that you talked about, they are very obscure.
They are, yes, and anybody who claims to have spotted them on a first watch is fucking lying. Some of them are literal blink and you'd miss it references to not obscure stuff, but like I said, the Mary name badge thing. You barely see that on screen. It's on screen for a couple of seconds, and the only reason it was noticed after the fact is that when it came out on DVD and people paused it, went through frame by frame. Because that's just Edgar Wright movies are crammed with this sort of thing. And it's understandable that people would miss references like that on a first or second or maybe third watch, or wouldn't notice them until they're pointed out after the fact by someone like myself and then go look for them. But there are other references which are a bit more direct. For example, the line, "We're coming to get you, Barbara," screamed by Nick Frost into the phone at the eponymous Shaun's mum.
I don't want to cause a fuss.
We're coming to get you, Barbara!
I fucking love that. I also love that just Shaun's mum. That is just such a mum. That character is exactly how a British mum would react in a zombie apocalypse, isn't it?
When he goes round, doesn't she offer to make him a sandwich or a cup of tea or something like that?
Yeah, that's like, and I look at that, that's what my mum would do. It's like when he's talking to her on the phone. It's like, "Mum, are you okay?" It's like, "Yes." It's like, some men tried to get in earlier and you see Shaun "Ooh, are they still there?" It's like, "Well, we shut the curtains." And just some of the lines between her and Bill Nighy, where it's like, "Oh, I told you, we need to go to a doctor." It's like, "No, I ran it under the tap."
Under a cold tap.
That's what old people do. It's like they don't give a fuck. The one that gets me, and it's one that I didn't know, it's the second time I watched it, and it's such a subtle fucking dig, is he says, well, you know, we had our jabs when we went to the Isle of Wight. Because it's technically abroad.
Well, I thought we ought to be on the safe side.
I'm quite all right, Barbara. I ran it under a cold tap.
I really think...
We had our jabs when we went to the Isle of Wight.
But Philip...
It's a lot of overblown nonsense.
And that character is fucking incredible. And the line, "We're coming to get you, Barbara," for people who may be wondering, like, what's the direct reference there, is a almost verbatim quote from the opening scene of the movie that kickstarted the entire zombie genre, Night of the Living Dead, where a character says, "They are coming to get you, Barbara."
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
So George Romero directed that film?
George Romero directed and wrote that film, meaning that he wrote the line that they were referencing in that scene. And as such, Edgar Wright was convinced that George Romero would get that reference and was terrified that he would not take kindly to them essentially just ripping off his seminal work of zombie fiction. And according to Edgar Wright, the only person whose approval he wanted for Shaun of the Dead was that of George Romero. The story goes that when George Romero got to see a cut of the film and referred to it as, and I quote, "an absolute blast," Edgar Wright insisted that that was the quote that appeared on the advertising marquee. He said, if that quote needs to go on the fucking poster. That's the only quote I care about. I don't care about quotes from any other critics. That's the one that has to go on. This is the only person whose opinion matters on this film. The guy who invented the genre we are homaging. And one of the reasons I think Shaun of the Dead works so well is that Edgar Wright specifically wrote it as if it was another story in the Dawn of the Dead universe happening at around the same time. Because that's the thing, like when Dawn of the Dead's happening, that one's a group of people holed up in a mall, you don't know what's happening all the way over in the UK. And the way Edgar Wright describes it is like, Shaun's not trying to save the day, he's just trying to survive, and that's the story we're trying to tell. We didn't need to tell a bigger story than that. And there are some funny nods to that in the film, the most notable being when Shaun and his group meet the other group, which has like the parallel to their entire group in it. And the reason Edgar Wright put that in is before the idea of somebody else having just a better idea than you to survive the zombie apocalypse happening like concurrently with your story was really funny. And in that vein, he got like better known actors to play the parallel to everyone in Shaun's group. And ostensibly that group's story is more interesting than one the film is following. And they have a better go of it because they all survived because they had a better idea. And I fucking love that because it's such a British thing to do. It's like, oh, we'll just go to the pub, and like, really? The character, like he speaks to, even says actually like, the pub? Oh, okay then. I guess that's what you're doing. And I love it. It's so good.
Have you got somewhere you're going?
Yeah, we're going to the Winchester.
The pub?
Yeah.
Right, well, good luck!
But let's bring it back to George Romero and that quote, because Edgar Wright was convinced that George Romero would, one, recognise it, and two, be pissed off about it. And he was pleasantly surprised when, as mentioned, George Romero saw the film and referred to it as an absolute blast. And he did have the opportunity to speak to George Romero about it a couple of weeks later. And during that conversation, he and Simon Pegg brought up the line, "We're coming to get you, Barbara," and asked him, did you mind us using that line? To which George Romero was like, what do you mean, using that line? Well, it's a line from your film. George Romero's like, what do you mean? Like, did you know, it's a reference to Night of the Living Dead. Did you get that? And George Romero just went, no. And that was it.
What?
Yeah.
How would you not know?
You didn't know. A reference to a movie he wrote. That's awesome. He just thought it was a cool zombie movie because he wasn't watching it to like look out for the references. He just wanted to watch it as like, just a zombie flick. Like, just an extension of the genre he helped create. He didn't care about the references. He just cared that it was a good story told in the universe he'd helped create.
After all that panicking, just like, I didn't even notice anyway.
Didn't even fucking notice. Again, I know that the weird people in the comments are screaming about this right now, so I should mention the fact that George Romero was, he enjoyed the movie so much that he offered Edgar Wright and Nick Frost a cameo in Land of the Dead. And they refused and said, no, if we're going to have a cameo, we want to be zombies. So they're the zombies that are chained up in Land of the Dead.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because that's the thing people are going to be screaming. Did you know? So, yes, I fucking know that. The last thing I want to mention, because I think this is really funny, is when George Romero was asked about what he thought of Dawn of the Dead, the 2004 remake, he said it was okay for the first 20 minutes. and then unfavourably compared it to a video game that wasn't scary or interesting. And that's like, you know, a criticism that makes sense when you realise that film was directed by Zack Snyder.